Welcome back everyone, this is Maui again, and we're continuing with the SQL attacks from where we stopped last time. So last time we talked about union attack and order by, and in today's video we'll continue on that attack again to retrieve more information, to do more critical attacks. So let's dive in. Using SQL injection union attack to retrieve interesting data. When you have determined the number of columns returned by the original query and found which columns can hold string data, you are in a position to retrieve interesting data. So previously remember that we were using union select and then we were putting nulls as the columns, and that will give us the number of columns that the table has, and then we were replacing the nulls with strings, numbers, just to know what the data type of the column is. Suppose that the original query returns two columns, both of which can hold a string data. The injected pointer is a quoted string with the where clause, and the database contains a table called users with the columns username and a password. So let's look at the example. A union select, instead of the nulls we have two columns, a username column and a password column, and now we have the from, which determines which table are these columns pointing to. So we're retrieving username and password from the table that's called users. In order to perform this attack, you need to know that there's a table called users with the two columns, which is username and a password. Without this information, you'd have to guess the name of the tables and the columns. All modern databases provide ways to examine the database structure and determine what columns and what tables exist. So basically in a normal penetration testing or web penetration testing, bug bounty or anything like that, you'll need to determine what's the database, what's the table types, what's the names of the tables, what's the columns inside each table, and we will get into that step by step. So let's continue. And as you can see, we have a lab here, SQL injection union attack, retrieving data from other tables. The lab contains an SQL injection vulnerability in the product category filter as before. The result from the query are returned in the application's response. So you can use a union attack to retrieve data from other tables. To construct such an attack, you need to combine some of the techniques you learned in the previous lab. The database contains different tables called users with the column name, username and a password. To solve the lab, perform an SQL injection union attack to retrieve usernames and passwords that contained in the table users, and use this information to log in as the administrator user. So unlike before, when we tried to log in as the administrator using the login form where we just put a comment next to the username and then left the password blank, this time we have to actually retrieve the password of the administrator to be able to log in. So let's access the lab. As you can see here, we've accessed the lab, and let's click on gifts as before. So remember the techniques that we did before. Let's try it again. Single code to test. Oops, I guess that's from previous labs. Single quote, and now you have an internal server error. You know that it's vulnerable to SQL, and now we'll use as union select. As the lab described, you have two columns, which is why this works. And now I can just replace the second null with, let's say, P, and that worked. And then replacing the first one with, let's say, an A, and as we can see, that worked also. And now we know that we have two columns and both of them are a string, so we can, instead of A, we can put the username, and instead of the B, we can just put the password field. So now we can do it here, and this is the first thing that I will start with. Can delete all of this, and we have a union select, and then we have a username, which is the first column, password as the second, from, and we're deciding the table, which is users, as you can see. And now we've returned some users, and as you can see here, the administrator with his password, Weinar with his password, and Carlos with his password. But I want to show or showcase another way to do that, because when it comes to testing SQL, it's pretty annoying to test it in the URL, I would say. So usually we'll use Burp Suite, and this is the appropriate tool created by Portswigger for testing web application vulnerabilities. And let's start with it. So I'll load my Burp Suite and come back. Give me a second. Alright, let's continue. So I switched to Burp Suite's Chromium browser, and I have the same payload, same everything, as you can see. Now I'll switch to Burp Suite. Mind me, I'll just open my Burp Suite in here. I can navigate to HTTP history, and as you can see, now we have all the requests that are made, and they're labeled from 1 to 9. I can just change that to 1 to 9, and then I'll go to the last one, which is a get request. I can send it to the repeater tab by right click and then repeater, or just Control R, and that will send it to repeater. So basically what repeater will do is that you can modify a request and send it, see the response, and then keep modifying and sending again. So you can repeatedly sending the request multiple times. So in the category field, I have gifts, So let me send the normal request. As you can see here, I have a response with 200 status. Okay, so it means that the request got in, and here you can view the code. Usually we view it more than rendering it, but you can also render, which will show you the actual page and how it looks, as you can see. And now I can try my attack here. So I can just comma and then union. As you can see, the union now is in black, and this means that it's not encoded or URL encoded. So I can just right click, and where is that URL encode as you type. So I can just say union. As you can see, the space is switching to a plus. Union select, and then I can say null and a comma or a comment, and then I get 200. Okay, it means that the payload is working. Let's say I send one null instead of two, meaning one column. I will get 500, which is internal server error, and this is how I'll know that my attack doesn't work. And now let's go back and put my username and password. So username, comma, password from, and my table was users. So you can send that, and now as you can see, I can search in here and write admin. I will get the administrator and his password. So similarly to what we had before, it's just how you can use it with Burp Suite. Now you can just copy the password of the admin and the username and try to log in. So that's what I will do. Go to my account. You can try doing the administrator with a comment and then anything on the password. As you can see, it told you it's invalid, meaning that they modified. So now putting the administrator, oh, that says password, administrator and his password, and as you can see, we solved the lab successfully. And that's it for this lab. Pretty easy, pretty normal. So continuing, retrieving multiple values within a single column. In some cases, the query in the previous example may only retain a single column. You can retrieve multiple values together within a single column by concatenating the values together. You can include a separator to let you distinguish the combined value. For example, on Oracle, you can submit the input, union select username, which is the column name, and then here you're concatenating it with the password column into one column, and then from the table user. Assuming that the table you're dealing with in the application has only one column and you still want to retrieve a username and a password, one can say that I can only retrieve one at a time, like a usernames, and then I can retrieve the list of passwords and then try which username matches which password. But a better way is to just concatenate them, and this will mean that you have two values within a single column, username, and then after the username you'll have this sign and then the password. This uses the double pipe sequence, which is a string concatenation operator on Oracle. The injected query concatenates together the values of the username and a password fields. Separated by the, I don't know what this value is called, by this character. The result from the query contains all the usernames and passwords. For example, you have administrator, and here you have the sign that you defined, tilde. You can change it to a dot or anything else, and then you have the password. Similarly with Winer Peter and other usernames. And different databases using different syntax perform string concatenation. For more details, you can open the SQL cheat sheet as I have opened here. So let's continue. And now we have the lab, SQL injection union attack, retrieving multiple values within a single column. This lab contains an SQL injection vulnerability in the product category filter, as we've used before. The results from the query are returned in the application response, so you can use a union attack to retrieve data from other tables. The database contains a different table called users with a column name, username and password. Similarly to the previous lab, to solve the lab, perform an SQL injection union attack that retrieves all usernames and passwords, then use it to log in as the administrator user. So let's access the lab. So I have loaded the website in my Chromium, and now it's within the proxy. So I'll just continue with Burp Suite. Drag this down. I'll change this to the last request, and it's supposed to be a get request like this one, and it should be this request. Let's look at it, render, and that's it. We've cached the request, and now we want to go to the one of these. So I can just write, or I will just go to the browser, that's easier, and then I will go to one of these. Let's say take gifts, and with the filter and category. And now I'll just open my Burp Suite again. Once I opened it, I'll go to the new request, which is this one. Send it to repeater. And now send it just to make sure that it's working. Once we're sure that the website's working and loaded, we can start with the attack. As we said before, let's test how many columns it has. Union select, and then null. We got an internal server error, so it means that it's not a one column. Let's try two. We got a 200. Okay, my guess is that I'm using the previous website. Let me double check with this one. Yeah, I'm using the previous labs. It's not the actual new lab. Oh, let me try just to make sure that's not the previous one. Let's add a B in here, and let's add an A. And no, it's not the previous lab, because now we got an internal server error when we added an A here, and before it was working. So this field is not a string anymore. So let's add an integer. And as you can see, this field is now an integer, meaning that we can only work with the second field. So put this back as null, and this is the only field that we can work with. So what we're gonna do is we want to select the username. So username, and you want to concat it with the password field. So write this, and then password I think, and then from the table which is users, send that. I got a 200. Okay, I'm gonna quick search for the word admin. As you can see here, I have the word administrator, and this is his password. So I'll just copy the password, that will be easier. And now navigate to my account, enter the password, into the username, administrator, login. As you can see, the lab is solved, and that's how you can work with one column when it comes to retrieving data. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.